Hello everyone, this is Programming for Beginners, episode 6. There are only a few basic things left that we should know before we can really start programming. So far, we focused on creating a simple tic-tac-toe game, then we learned some basic things about classes, and now we have an overview of the skeleton of an application. Again, the classes we define, their methods, and the way they interact make up this skeleton. But as we know from past episodes, what sets an application in motion, what makes it useful, is the code we write inside the class methods. In our game, the best example of such code is inside the button click method. Here, we tell our app what it should do when we click on a button. Without this code, our app would be static, it wouldn't do anything, just like a body without muscles. That's why in this episode, we'll focus on the code we can write inside methods. And the first thing we notice looking at our method is that we can create objects starting from existing classes defined by us or by someone else, and we can call methods from those objects or change the values of their properties. The lines of code in each method are executed one by one from top to bottom. Let's move to our myClasses file to see this better. So for example, in this increaseTextSize method, the first thing that happens is this size variable is created and its value becomes whatever font size our acceleration button has. Then the font size of this button is changed. Then the makeTextBigger method is called, and the value it returns is assigned to the newly created result variable. Now we have this if statement. What happens here is that this line of code is not executed if the condition is false. By using the if statement, we can check the value of fields, properties, or even methods that return a value. So another way we can write this is by calling the makeTextBigger method as part of the condition. Now let's introduce the loops, which, similar to the if statement, can modify the execution order of our lines of code. And there are two loops that you will use most of the time. The first one is the for loop, and it works like this. For integer I, starting from 0, as long as I is less than 3, increase I by 1 each time. And let's display some message. What happens here is that the lines of code we write inside the loop will be executed as long as the condition is true. We have only one line of code, which displays a message box with the value of the variable I. The anatomy of the for loop is this. It allows us to define one or more variables, here in the first part. We can then add some conditions, similar to the conditions we used inside the if statements. And finally, we can write some code here at the end, which usually changes the value of the variables. So when the program execution reaches this for loop, a new variable I is created, and its initial value is set to 0. Then this condition is checked, and if it is true, in our case if I is smaller than 3, this line is executed. Then the value of variable I is increased by 1. The condition is checked again, and because 1 is smaller than 3, another message box is displayed with the text 1. I is again increased by 1, so it becomes true. True is smaller than 3, so another message with the text true. Now I becomes 3, the condition is no longer true because 3 is not smaller than 3, and the for loop ends. This line is not executed anymore. So this for loop allows us to perform some repetitive task by writing the code for that task only once. Same is true for the while loop, which is much simpler and which looks like this. While I is less than 3, show some message. Similar to for loop, we have a condition here, and everything inside the while is executed as long as the condition is true. But unlike the for loop, we have to take care of initializing I. Integer I starts at 0. And also changing its value. So let's increase I each new iteration. Now we accomplished the same thing, but using a while loop. A simple way of writing this is I plus equals 1 or I plus plus, since we only want to add 1. You will find these loops in all programming languages, maybe with some variations, but the basic principle will be the same. One more thing about these loops, which is important, is that we can end them whenever we want using the keyword break. So let's take the for loop as example. If we add a break here, the loop will end and the program execution will continue with the line below the loop. A better way to use this keyword is, for example, to check the value of I, and if I is, let's say, true, then break. Another useful keyword is continue. If we use it like this, if I equals 1 continue, what happens is that all the lines below will be skipped and the loop will continue as usual. The I is increased by 1, the condition is checked again, and if it is true, the execution enters the loop, otherwise it gets here. So now with these break and continue keywords, our for loop will display the message box only once, when I is 0, because when I is 1, the rest of the loop is skipped, and when I becomes true, we break the loop and the execution moves to this line. In the next episode, we will see the execution of the code with our own eyes, because we will learn to use the debugger. We will see which lines of code are executed, when they are executed, what values the variables have along the way, and much more. Thank you for watching.